Are you ready for a show that talks sports from the fans' point of view?
We've seen Michael Jordan score 37 points a game in his era. How many could he score in today's NBA?
There's not a player out there who I'd rather have than LeBron James.
Are you ready for a show that isn't afraid to challenge anyone when it comes to sports? If Adam Silver really wanted to fix tanking in the NBA, he would stop rewarding teams by giving them the best chance to win the draft lottery.
I mean, how many times will Roger Goodell drop the ball on handling domestic violence in the NFL?
Look, athletes have every right to talk politics, but if the fans stop tuning in, that's their right.
Then you're ready for Talk Back, a podcast where two fans debate the media narrative and discuss the world of sports as we see it.
Welcome to the show.
Welcome to another edition of Talk Back. I am your MC, Eric Nesbit, and with me as always is Justin Gay, your host and director of content. Justin, I had to think back a little bit to when we were in college because we've been talking sports now for 20 years, it seems like. It really is literally almost 2 decades. And the reason I thought about our college years, and I don't know why this memory came floating in, but we're now through the month of February. It's been a little bit cold this week. And I was thinking about another cold February moment that happened in our dorm room back when we were roommates in college. And I wanted you to just kind of share with the listeners how you almost killed us that night.
Well, when we were roommates, we were in an older building on the campus, and it didn't have the greatest amenities there. So a lot of times the heat would just burn us up. No matter what time of year it was, it always felt hot. I was somebody that liked a room that was, let's say, a little on the colder side. I think Eric felt that way too. And one evening, I decided to leave our window cracked, and it wasn't cooling down, so I opened it a little more. And we wake up in the middle of the night and there's snow in the room because now there's this massive snowstorm and it's blowing into the room and the room is freezing cold now. So, yeah, not the best idea. Probably should have had a screen on that window. That would have been helpful as well. We were up high enough where we didn't feel like someone was going to come in and join us. Of course, nowadays, I definitely would have had it locked and probably deadbolted. But back then, it felt like a nice campus. But yes, I definitely almost froze us to death that February night.
That was probably one of the 2 times I almost died in that dorm room. And I wanted to see where you were going with that story because it started with, well, I left the window cracked. It was definitely more than cracked by the time we woke up at 5, 6 a.m. with icicles coming off of our face and a foot of snow because it had started snowing that night and the window was, I wouldn't say wide open, but it was definitely open more than a crack. But then another time you almost killed me was when, see, I slept on the top bunk, Justin was on the bottom bunk, and I remember another time that you woke up and you were getting ready for class, and you thought it would just be fun to go ahead and yank on the sheet that was kind of wrapped around me, and I don't know if I was wadded up in it like a taco or a burrito or what, but I came out of that bed pretty quickly and almost made it all the way to the floor. Thankfully, you gave me a little bit of a hip check, and I kind of bounced off of your bunk before I hit the floor. And you really had it out for me back then.
Yeah, I always gave you CTE at a fairly early age without the football in there. And speaking of football, I also drilled you with that. So I'm pleased to tell the listening audience that you do have 3 kids and you did survive those football days.
Oh, yeah. I always loved the no-look pass, the Patrick Mahomes. I mean, Mahomes probably wasn't even born yet when we were finishing up that part of college, and you were the champion of the no-look pass. The only problem is it was a no-look pass right into my groin, usually coming down the hall from dinner or class or whatever, and I never saw it coming. You'd think I would get smart to that at some point. But someone who's not really very good at the no-look pass these days is LeBron James and possibly even his buddy Kyrie Irving. We're going to talk about NBA a lot in segment 1. There's a lot going down as we get closer to these playoffs. A lot of teams are pushing. Some teams are even falling behind, like those Lakers. But Justin, our team, the Philadelphia 76ers, I think they're right where they need to be going into this playoff push. They've got a lot of tough games coming up, but I feel like they can do some damage this year. But we want to talk about those Celtics too, because that's their bugaboo come playoff time, and they're right around each other in the standings. So plenty to look at as we get toward April and May in the NBA season. Then, of course, we need to talk about some of the underrated players that may be kind of having great seasons and just really no one's talking about them. Then we'll take a short little break. We'll have the advertisers pay for the show. And then in Talkworthy, we'll bring on the NFL. There's certainly some interesting topics going on in the NFL. Then we'll talk about NASCAR, where they're at after Las Vegas. And if we have time, we'll wrap up on some thoughts on the big monster deals out of Major League Baseball. We've got all of that and more on episode 238 of Talk Back.
Well, Eric, we tried to tell our listeners a few weeks ago when they were getting burnt out on all the NFL talk not to worry because NBA talk was coming. The NBA has basically taken over. There's so much star power in the league that there's storylines all the time in the NBA. There's the stuff that you hear basically daily on nearly every talk show, every talking head, sports talk radio, etc. The Lakers topic obviously is there. And then there's a lot of things brewing under the surface with some good stories as well. But there's one story that's starting to pick up some steam, and that's with another team in the NBA that has massively disappointed a lot of people this year, and not just those in Boston. There was a lot of people that were all over this Celtics team. Eric, I was looking back at our notes from earlier this season when we kind of do the preview show of the NBA, talk about the Vegas over-under numbers that they set for some of the bigger teams in the league. The Celtics were set at 57.5. That was their over-under. I think most people to begin this season thought the Celtics were the odds-on favorite to go play Golden State in the NBA Finals, and it has been nothing close to that for this Celtics team so far. But, of course, then, the way the NBA goes, they go into Golden State on Monday night of this week and absolutely truck the Golden State Warriors. So makes a lot of sense based on how the NBA seems to work that night in, night out. You really don't know what you're going to get in the regular season. But, Eric, I think overall this Celtics team, there's a 5 seed right now in the East. I think they have just massively underachieved for this year.
I totally agree with that. This is a team that we did talk about as being the odds-on favorite to win the East. I mean, granted, at that time, we didn't think the Milwaukee Bucks would be what they are now. We knew that Giannis was going to be a superstar. He is a superstar, and he has been a superstar. We knew he would play well. They've picked up some other pieces. They've got younger pieces playing well, and now they seem to have that momentum through the season where they're still picking up pieces. Gasol coming over. They are making a title push, and I think the Celtics are going to have to go through Milwaukee if they have any chance to meet the Warriors in the finals. Not only that, Toronto has, quite frankly, played better than I thought they would. I thought Kawhi Leonard would be sort of a lame duck season, and it's not that you're, looking at him as the MVP of the league this year or anything like that, but he's certainly played well enough to be respected in Toronto for what they're accomplishing in the standings. I got to give a shout out to the Pacers.
Yeah.
Victor Oladipo goes down with one of those rare leg injuries. You don't see it too often in basketball, and it's actually not a very easy injury to come back from, that quadricep tear right above the knee. So obviously hope that he can get that healed up, and it's going to take some time, and he can come back and be the player that he was. But they're still hanging there in third place. So you kind of keep digging further. You've got our Sixers, and then like you said, in fifth place is the Celtics. I don't believe either one of us thought this late in the season, fifth place would be where Boston is sitting. They're not too far ahead of Brooklyn. I mean, yeah, it's a few games, but Brooklyn, Detroit, Charlotte, why are we having that conversation with Boston being in the bottom half of the 8 in the Eastern Conference? To me, there's a lot of disjointed play there with Kyrie Irving. I'm not really sure he was ready for the role that he asked for. But moreover, Gordon just doesn't seem right still. I mean, he's coming back. He's playing some good minutes, and he's had some good games. He's not the same player he was in Utah. And last year, when they made it that deep into the playoffs with Irving and Hayward on the bench due to injury, you had superstars rising up like Tatum, even guys like Smart, and guys that really were playing roles all season, but then ended up being the go-to guys come playoff time. Now you just plug in Irving and Hayward, and you thought, well, this is going to be a blowout season because they've got everybody. It's just not gelling, and it's just not working. So yeah, Justin, I mean, I'm as shocked as anybody. And if you had to ask me right now, will the Celtics go deep into the playoffs or even make it to the finals? It's going to depend on their matchups. And I know you'll talk about that in a minute when we get to the Sixers, but depending on their matchups, I don't see them going to the NBA Finals.
This Celtics team to me seems they're going to go as far as mentally they allow themselves to go, because I don't think this has anything to do with talent or potential matchup issues or problems. I think this is all mental on this team, that they just have not gelled as a team. And Kyrie is not helping the situation at all, because I don't think he understands how to be a leader, Eric. Basically, all the reasons that he wanted out from under LeBron, he's basically doing to all the young guys on this team. Going public with things, constantly complaining about them, using a conversation with LeBron and making that public about them. He just has not put himself in a position, and he talks about that. He's like 25, and he's been injured a ton, and he's got one title where he was second fiddle to LeBron on that team, even though he hit the big shot and he played big minutes and played a big role in that finals. He was still the second guy. He was still 1B to LeBron's 1A. So for him to come out and act like he's this grizzled veteran, that he's been through all these battles, and he always acts like he's so pissed off, and he's always mad at the world, and he's cussing at cameras walking in. I can't wait till I'm done with this. Dude, like, everybody's brought up the point, like, you made Uncle Drew. They launched this summer, and now you're talking about wanting to just be a basketball player. You're on TV with your Nike commercials, with your dad. You're the one that's putting yourselves out there. You want to be a star. Now all of a sudden you just want to flip the switch and turn it off. It's just not that easy. You're in a situation with a team that has a tremendous amount of talent around it, and you create a lot of drama for this team and for yourself. You came out and said that you wanted to re-sign with Boston, and then you're in the tunnel with Durant looking like you're talking about free agency. You're not shooting down rumors about wanting to play with the Knicks or going somewhere else. You go back to the Ask Me on July 1st where you're going on free agency. Kyrie hasn't done himself any favors, Eric, and I feel like his negativity and his approach to this team with these young guys has really derailed the whole season. These guys look at him and say, you know what? We were one game for the NBA Finals last year, and you weren't even a part of this team for the last part of the regular season and the entire playoff run. We did all this without you. And now you're coming back here and you want to sit there and put us all down? You want to sit there and act like we don't know what we're doing? I think, Eric, that's just rubbed these guys the wrong way. And look, some of these other younger guys, they're at fault too, because they don't seem to understand their role on this team. That's the one thing that's always made the Warriors different, because they all understand their role. Steph doesn't care if he has a night where he has 10 points. Klay doesn't have a night where if he only gets 4 or 5 shots, he's not bitching in the media about it. Kevin Durant's the same way. These guys, they seem to be generally happy for each other outside the whole Draymond KD thing. And again, that was brought on by a lack of dealing with the free agent talk and trying to be too open about it. But for the most part of their run, they have been able to be a pretty cohesive unit and keep most of their stuff in-house. And they generally seem happy for each other. That's not what I see in Boston at all, Eric. I just see the young guard that's like, we've been here, Kyrie. We don't need you constantly going to the media and bashing us publicly.
Yeah, and the other thing I was thinking when you were talking about the leadership aspect of it, Justin, is how do you feel like Brad Stevens plays into this? Because when you had last year and they made that run and it was like, oh, everything's great. Look at what a great coach he is. That's fine when there's no adversity. This year, it's like, is he overmatched a little bit by these NBA personalities? I'm not sure. I'm not sure that's the case at all. But it's just kind of going through my mind that you've got Kyrie, the guy who is a star and said he wanted to lead this team, being kind of a complete mess, taking lessons from all of the wrong moves. Even some of the moves he's copying from LeBron aren't my favorite moves by any stretch. And it just seems like Brad Stevens doesn't have a whole lot of connection or control with what's out there with this team. When you don't have a cohesive unit, whether on the floor or in the media afterwards, you kind of look and say, okay, is the coach really prepared to lead a team through this tough growing situation? It's the same thing we've talked about with the Sixers. You have a very young team that has potential. You need a coach that can solidify them and help them through growing pains, because that's what makes them good. Phil Jackson took guys like Michael Jordan and Scottie Pippen and Ron Harper and all those guys, Dennis Rodman, put all of them together and was able to make them work together to achieve a common goal and do it many, many times over. You don't think that team had personalities? They most certainly did. But here in the NBA today, you're not just going to take a Brad Stevens, plug him in and say, all right, deal with all these NBA guys making $40 million and expect to just have it always be sunshine, roses, and puppies all the time.
No, I think you make a great point there. And look at where Brad Stevens came from. He came from Butler, a mid-level college that Gordon Hayward was basically the biggest star that they have. And obviously they had a very good relationship with each other, where I don't think Gordon Hayward doesn't come across as a guy that carries himself in a manner that he's this giant superstar. You know, he just doesn't have that type of persona that I felt like. He went to Utah. You know, he really wasn't a star power guy. He wasn't an all-star till later in